A little bit of background about myself. I've worked in the sustainability field for 20 years or so now, and for the last 10 of them have been focused on solar and energy efficiency projects. I've worked in quite a few different local governments, done lots of solar panel projects on public buildings ranging from 5 to 500 kilowatts in size. And now in my current other life, I work with non-profits doing similar stuff, but more sort of focused on providing advice and developing business cases for solar panels and battery projects. And as part of that, I've looked at lots and lots of different solar quotes for organisations all around Australia. What I am not is an electrician or a solar installer. So if you've got some sort of detailed electrical question or Western Power rule you'd like clarified, I'm not really a person. My experience is more around energy and carbon management as a whole, but I do hope that that background brings more of a consumer perspective to this workshop. And it's because, look, I can guarantee that I've been confused by, just about everything that you'd probably be confused about as well. And I've got through it and got there. So, yeah, so just a disclaimer, I have prepared this workshop to the best of my ability using my experience and research, but this is a really rapidly changing industry. And I do this workshop about once a month, and I'm always having to update something in there. And the other thing is I'm only human. So please do your own research if there's something that you're not entirely sure about. So Switch Your Thinking, you might be wondering who they are. Switch Your Thinking are a sustainability initiative founded in 2002 by the City of Armidale, City of Gosnells and the Shire of Serpentine Jarrahdale. They all work together as the South East Regional Energy Group, and their main objective is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through lots of different sustainability education initiatives. They work with 16 local governments across Perth, and they put on lots of workshops like this. If you're interested in their work, you can go and have a look at their website and follow them on the socials and sign up to their e-news and all those things. But this particular workshop is a little bit different to Switch Your Thinking's workshops because it's part of their energy efficiency pilot program, which has now been running for a few months and has been funded and supported, and their name has just changed, so I apologise that I've got the wrong name on there, but it's the Department of Energy and Economic Diversification now. So this has been funded by them. This program is something that's open to everyone in WA. So the project is for funding a whole lot of free workshops on lots of different energy related topics. I've done some of the other ones on energy efficiency and electric vehicles, but it's not just funding workshops, it's funding these really amazing energy audit kits, which are available now to borrow from more than 100 different libraries and community resource centres all around the state. And the kit contains lots of cool stuff, but I think the most exciting thing about this is the thermal camera, which is quite an expensive piece of kit even to rent, and it's really useful for things like checking your insulation and your air gaps in your homes and things like that. And so, yeah, make sure you go down to your local library and check out your local energy audit kit and audit your house. The other really great thing about this project is that just by attending one of these workshops, including this one, or borrowing an energy audit kit and completing the feedback form, you could win an in-home energy audit or a NatHERS assessment, which is like an energy efficiency assessment on a new home design. And as part of that, terms and conditions apply, but have a look at the Switch Your Thinking website for more details on that. At the end of this workshop, I'll put up a QR code that you can scan to access that feedback form. Make sure I don't forget, because sometimes I do when I get carried away talking about solar panels. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? Firstly, I'm going to talk about how solar panels and batteries work. I'm going to talk about using your bill and a calculator to check if solar panels are worth it for you and what size you should go for. We're going to talk about batteries. We're going to talk about the rebates, which is a really hot topic right now. We're going to talk about how to find a reputable installer and how to get a good quote. And as part of that, we'll talk about things like your roof, the brands that you might want to look at, also hot water, which is actually quite important. You'll find out later why. And also then once it's installed, what maintenance do you need to do? Hopefully that covers everything that you guys want to know. We've got a few people online tonight, so I'm not sure we're going to get to everyone's questions, but if you do have them, you can pop them in the chat. And because Kerry's online as well, she's going to be typing furiously behind the scenes and answering any questions, and then hopefully we'll get to the rest at the end. My hope is for this evening is that I'm going to be able to give you all the information you need and nothing that you don't, and give you some reputable resources that you can go to after today to answer any follow-up questions that you've got. So you don't get that dreaded disease, which is analysis paralysis, and that's what that poor fellow on the slide has got. And this afflicts so many people who are buying solar panels, and we don't want you to get that, because solar panels are really great, and we don't want you to, miss out because it all feels too hard. There are lots of links in today's presentation, and I haven't done it yet, but at the end I will pop a link in the chat to a document, which is a handout with all of those links on it. And also I'll have a QR code at the end so you can download the document with all the links in it. Something else to clarify before I get into today's presentation is also that I'm going to be talking about grid-connected systems today, not off-grid. And I think a lot of people would really love to go off-grid in the city, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, because you kind of need to size the batteries really huge to cover all eventualities, like you're having 7 days, cloudy days in a row, or all of your relatives are coming to visit at once. And that just means it's really expensive. In a rural area, if you are building a new house, it's going to cost a lot to run the power to your house anyway. That might be a situation where it makes financial sense. But I'm not going to talk about that specifically today. But of course, some of the stuff might apply. All right, how do solar panels work? Would you believe I couldn't find a nice diagram on how grid-connected solar power works, so I had to make my own with these dodgy clip art and GIFs. But hopefully it shows you how it works. It all starts with the sun. It sends sunlight down to the earth, which hits the solar panel and excites free electrons, which are sitting in a silicon matrix in the panel. And that creates a current, which is called DC, or direct current electricity. And that electricity goes to an inverter, which changes it to AC electricity, or alternating current electricity. And that's the type of electricity that can be used by your household appliances. And then that electricity is used by your house. If there's any left over, that goes to the grid. If your house needs more than what the solar panels are providing, they take the excess from the grid to top it up. So you can see here how important the inverter is as part of your system, because not only does it change the electricity, it also monitors the system, it manages the quality of the power, and it makes sure it's all working really safely with the grid. But what if you've got a battery? What happens then? So there's two main ways that this can be done. And the first one is with a hybrid inverter, which is also called DC coupling. So batteries are charged by DC electricity, and a hybrid inverter will take that DC electricity, turn it into AC to run your house first, take any leftover DC and then use that to charge the battery, and then after that convert the rest to AC so it can go to the grid. So basically it's sort of one device that can charge the battery, supply your house and the grid, and make all that work together. This is the situation that would normally happen if you're installing solar and batteries at the same time. Or sometimes it might also happen if you've got an existing system and you decide to take the old inverter off and put a hybrid inverter on. And that seems to be what's happening more and more often. The second way is called AC coupling, and this would be usually what would happen if you already had solar panels and you just wanted to tack on a battery. So in this case, the solar inverter changes the electricity to AC. It goes to a battery inverter to be changed back to DC. Then it charges the battery. Then it comes out of the battery and goes to the inverter to be changed back to AC again, and then go to your house. So it's a bit more of a roundabout route, and you lose a little bit of electricity every time it changes from AC to DC, but it works fine. It's not hugely material. So with an AC coupled system, you might have an extra little box on your wall. That's the battery inverter, or it might be an inverter that's incorporated into the battery itself. And we'll talk a bit more about the pros and cons of AC and DC coupling later on. But for now, broadly, that's how it all works. And you'll hear your installer sort of throw those terms around. All right, so therefore, the parts of a solar system basically consist of the panels themselves, the inverter or inverters, the batteries, the racking, and then all of the wiring and bits and pieces that your installer does in between. And that brings me to something else, which is really important to know when you're buying solar panels, and that is how is electricity measured? So I think most people would have heard of a watt because it's what's on their light bulb box. So a watt is how much power your solar panels are producing or how much an appliance is using at any moment in time. And a kilo just means 1,000 and a kilowatt is 1,000 watts. So I've got a picture there of my LED light bulb, and it's a 4-watt light bulb. You can see how little power that uses compared to underneath that, which is my oil-filled column heater, and that can use up to 2,400 watts. A kilowatt hour is how much energy your appliance is using or your solar panels are producing over time. So if your solar panels are producing 3 kilowatts for 1 hour, they will have produced 3 kilowatt hours. If your panels are producing 3 kilowatts for half an hour, they will have produced 1.5 kilowatt hours. And a kilowatt hour is a unit in your electricity bill. And the two things are very often confused, even by solar salesmen and things like that. But the reason you need to know the difference is because you might get a 6.6 kilowatt system that produces 20 to 40 kilowatt hours of electricity over a day. Another way you might explain it that people sometimes get is like if you've got a hose, the kilowatts is how fast the water is coming out, and the kilowatt hours would be how much is in the bucket at the end. So hopefully everyone followed me through that because that's the most complex part of the whole presentation. You'll be fine from here. All right, so the very first step whenever I'm looking at getting solar panels is to get out my electricity bill. And the easiest way to do that is to log into your My Account data on Synergy, or Horizon also has a similar system, but I'm sorry I don't have an account with Horizon, so I'm not actually able to log into it to show you what it looks like, but it should look something basically like this. And you can see in Synergy's example, you can go to bills and payments up the top, and there'll be PDFs of all of your bills over for as long as you've had the account. So what you just need to do, there's all sorts of cool information in My Account. So have a look around there, lots of energy saving tips. But for the moment, what you need is basically your power bills. Just add up how much you've used over the last 12 months. And you need how much you use over a year, and then divide it by 12 as well. So you've got it per month. Now, the electricity credit has unfortunately made this a bit more confusing, but it doesn't really matter which 12 months you use as long as they're kind of representative of your energy use. So just go back to the last 12 months where you've got the full data without the electricity credit. All right, so the next step is to use a calculator. And I like to do this before I get quotes because it means I've got some independent information on what my solar system is going to save rather than relying on the installer's estimate, which has to be said can sometimes be a bit ambitious. And the first one I'm going to show you is one by Choice. Love Choice, really great consumer organisation, not-for-profit. And this one is really easy to use. And all you have to do is pop in your postcode and the number of people in your household and click Estimate. And my internet will be slow. There we go. And it just tells you, comes up with some figures. So it'll tell you how much you could expect to pay for a solar system between sort of 5,000 and 6,500, the time it would take to pay itself off, and the annual savings. And over here, you can actually play around. You can look at a smaller or a bigger system. You can add a battery on and things like that as well. Now, where you use your average monthly electricity spend is here. So you can click down and you can see here, if you've got a really high power bill, like $500 a month, the time it takes to pay itself off comes down and the yearly savings goes up. Whereas if you've got really low power bills, the payback period increases and the savings come down. So every workshop I do, someone will say to me, I live alone, I work all day, I've got a gas hot water system, are solar panels worth it for me? And I can't make that decision for you. This is where you go to find out. You put your bill in here and then you can make your own decision about whether it's going to be worth it for you. Now, this is a great tool, really easy to use, but it's easy to use because it uses lots of assumptions and averages. And you might not be average, and those assumptions may not apply to you. So I'm going to show you another calculator now, which is a bit more sophisticated. Now, this one is powered by a group called Solar Quotes, and you'll see down here that actually Choice has partnered with Solar Quotes to make this, this calculator. And I'm going to talk a bit about Solar Quotes today because they're a really great source of information. They're a quote generator and they've got their own vetted network of installers. So I guess you can't say they're completely independent like Choice, but they have gone to great lengths to maintain the independence in the advice that they give. And their website is really full of lots of really great information and tools. So they've got their own calculator here. Oops, I can't see it because, oh dear. I've got this thing in the way. There we go. All right. So here's their calculator. We'll scroll down. Again, it's still pretty easy to use. Let's just do the same. And then we put in here 6.6 kilowatts. There's a spot here to choose if you want north-facing panels or if they're on a different roof face. And we'll scroll down. We won't have a battery just yet, but we will come back and look at that in a minute. And it gives you an estimate of the cost of the system. So again, 6,600. This is where you put in your electricity costs. So you can find this on your power bill as well. But in WA at the moment, most people on Synergy, sorry, I can't speak for Horizon in this case, are on 32 cents. But you can, if you're in Horizon area, you can just go on your bill and find out what you're paying. So 32 cents per kilowatt hour. This is where you can put in your annual electricity spend. That's why I said you needed to add that up too. And we'll change it to that to make it the same as the last example. And Synergy, the main one, is $1.16. Now, the feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariff is what you get paid by your electricity company to send your electricity back to the grid. So Synergy's main tariff at the moment is 2 cents up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 10 cents after that up until 9 o'clock at night. So given most of your power will go out during the middle of the day, I'll just put 2 cents here. And obviously if you're with Horizon, you find out what yours is because I think that varies depending on where you live in the state. And then you just go calculate savings. And so this gives you heaps of great information. You can see that you get, it says about the same, about $1,000 per year savings. There's a 6-year payback. When you scroll down, you can see how much it saves you over its life. And so that's a pretty good holiday, I reckon, there after 10 years and then 20 years. And then over here, it shows you the cumulative savings. And this is interesting because it breaks it down into the feed-in tariff and self-consumption. So you can see here the feed-in tariff is actually a really small percentage of your savings. And so when people say, oh, the feed-in tariff's going down, it's not worth putting solar panels anymore, you can see that that's not true because most of your savings comes from avoiding buying power from the grid at 32 cents. So that's where most of your savings will come from. And I'm going to talk a lot about self-consumption tonight. This is useful too because this is what on average it should be generating per month. And yeah, this is really handy because once your solar panels are installed, you might be looking at them going, oh, I've got 6.6 kilowatts, but at the moment it's only generating 3 kilowatts. Something must be wrong with them, they're broken. That's not the case, they're not broken. So they'll never ever generate at their rated maximum at the 6.6 kilowatts. They'll always generate a bit less for lots of reasons, like it's cloudy, the angle they're on, the temperature, all sorts of things. So if you want to check, you can come back here and you can look at the month and you can look at it in the middle of the day and see, okay, the maximum it's going to generate in August will be about 3.8 kilowatts. And that changes a lot depending on the different months. So that's something else that's really handy. Now, speaking of self-consumption, up here you can see that this calculator assumes that about a quarter of the power that you generate will be consumed by your house. But if you're able to increase that, you can see how much that increases your savings and reduces your payback period. So if you can shift your power use to the middle of the day, that greatly changes the business case for your solar panels. All right. Let's go back now and put a battery in. So you can just go back and everything else there is the same. And we're going to put just like a battery, which is 11 kilowatt hours. That's pretty typical size for a battery. And this pops in the expected price with the federal rebate, but not with the WA rebate. So we can take a little bit off this price that's in here. 157. And then calculate the savings based on that. And so you can see how the savings go up. The payback of the combined system, the battery and the solar, is about 7 years. But over here, it breaks it down into what comes from the solar. And the solar does do most of the heavy lifting, and then what comes from the batteries. So yeah, these really handy tool. I like to use these calculators twice. Before I get the quote, and then once I get the quote back, I plug in what the actual costs are, because that actually could change your business case quite a bit. And that's how you can see if it's still worth it for you. And I'll also usually do a few scenarios with different size batteries, different size systems. So look at them side by side and see which one works the best. If you are a little bit more tech savvy and you like to really get into the detail, this is another tool called Sunspot, and that's been developed by universities and the Australian government. And this one, you can actually bring up some aerial imagery of your house, pop some solar panels on it, and all sorts of fancy things like that. So that's another one to try out. All right, so on to rebates. And so as of this moment for solar panels themselves, there's only one, and it's called the Small Scale Technology Certificates, or STCs. And it roughly takes about a quarter off the cost of your system. So STCs are certificates that are generated when you install a system, and you sign a form handing them over to your installer, and then they'll sell them to electricity companies who have to buy them to meet Australia's renewable energy target. And every year on January 1st, the number of available STCs per project reduces just a little bit. And it's going to keep doing that until 2030 when the scheme's going to go away entirely. So you can see if an installer is trying to pressure you saying the rebate's running out at the end of the year, you better sign on the dotted line. That's always a big red flag for me because, of course, it's good to be aware of. And if you're serious about solar, it's good to maybe get in before the end of the year. But it doesn't really make a huge difference to your savings, and the like quotes vary for all sorts of reasons anyway. So don't let them pressure you with that. Yeah, like I said, super easy. You sign a form at the end, hand them over. Some people sometimes ask, is it good to keep them and sell them themselves? I have actually tried it, and it's a giant hassle for not a great deal of reward because the value of the STC stays pretty constant. So yeah, I always just hand them over. So batteries, this is very exciting. We've now got two quite generous battery rebates in WA, one from the state government and the other from the Australian government, and both of those started on the 1st of July. And unfortunately, as you would expect, there's lots of unscrupulous sort of operators out there saying all sorts of things about the rebates, trying to get you to buy their deal. So just make sure that you're getting the right info. Go to those official websites, which I'll put on which I have on the handout, and get your information from there. So the first one is for the Australian government one. That's for batteries with 5 to 100 kilowatt hours in capacity. It will also use the STC system. So, but instead of the energy retailers buying the STCs, the government's going to do that. So, and in the same way, the discount's going to decrease a little bit over time until 2030. And look, the installer will just quote the STC discount on your quote, just like they do with solar panels. It's not like you have to apply specially or anything like that. So that's good. Uh, yeah, so it's a $372 per kilowatt hour of capacity of battery. So for most people, if they're getting a 10 kilowatt hour battery, that'll be about 3,700. And so that should reduce the cost by about 30%. It's for one battery at a single premises, so you can't get another one later. And it needs to have the technical capability to participate in a virtual power plant to be eligible. I'm going to tell you what a virtual power plant is in a minute. And the second one, the WA Residential Battery Scheme Take 2. And I say Take 2 because the details of this scheme did change from the original announcement, which was before the federal government rebate was announced. So they've refined this program to make it work better with that program. And now while the rebate is smaller, many more people are going to be able to access it. So that's a good thing. So it's up to 1,300 for Synergy customers. Again, that's based on per kilowatt hour, $130 per kilowatt hour battery capacity, and up to 3,800 for Horizon Power customers. And so when you combine that with the federal rebate for a 10 kilowatt hour battery, you should be getting $5,000 if you're in Synergy areas and $7,500 if you're in Horizon. Of course, if the battery is a bit bigger or smaller, it's going to be a bit different. They are also offering no interest loans as well, and that can be used for batteries for new and also new and upgraded equipment like inverters and panels and stuff, as long as they're installed with a battery. To access it, you need to use an accredited vendor from their list, and I've put that list on the handout, and also participate in a virtual power plant. So this is different from the Australian government's one. In this one, you are required to participate in a virtual power plant to get the rebate. And yes, all of the details are in that link, so have a good read of it. So what's a virtual power plant? A virtual power plant is basically a coordinated network of energy assets on lots of different buildings. And it's usually rooftop solar and battery storage systems, but it can take all sorts of forms. Some of them can be exposed to the wholesale energy market. Some have other appliances in there like EV chargers or air conditioners or hot water systems as well. So you might have heard about other programs like that over east. But in WA, like the VPPs that are under this particular rebate, the virtual power plant is really just confined to batteries for Synergy and solar and battery for Horizon. So for Synergy, they now have a battery rewards plan that you would sign up to, a bit like your electricity plan, and you sign up to that to get to the rebate and participate in the virtual power plant. And basically under battery rewards, Synergy would have the ability to draw power out of your battery and supply it to the grid when it's needed. And that sounds quite scary to a lot of people. Like they don't really like the idea of giving up control of their battery to the government, but it's actually a really powerful way to allow more renewables into the grid and also allow for grid stability. So just to give some perspective, with all the batteries that were combined, that would be installed under this rebate, that would be about half the capacity of the Collie big battery. So it's potentially a really big contribution to our grid, just like rooftop solar panels on all our houses are a big contribution to the grid. Now, with all virtual power plants, there's always lots of terms and conditions about how and when they can take that power. And with the Synergy one, they're saying they'll only use your battery during activation events, which is basically a time when they need it in the grid, like when it's under stress, which should usually be a really hot day or maybe a cold night. And in this case, they're saying there'll be a maximum of 30 activation events per year, with each event being a maximum of 6 hours and limited to one charge-discharge cycle per day. So I'm not sure why they've included that particular one, but I know other VPPs in other states have been criticised because they cycle the battery all the time and that can affect the life. So this is really good that they've only got one charge and discharge cycle per day. And then basically at all other times, your battery remains available for your own use and benefit. And of course, if they're going to take your power, they need to recompense you appropriately for that. And so in this case, they're saying that they'll pay 70 cents. So compare that to the 32 cents that you buy electricity for. Um, and for all of the electricity that's exported to the grid, plus they'll give you energy offset credits to cover your energy costs during that event. So look, it's at the very most, I think I calculated it to be a couple of $100. So it's not going to make you your millions, but it might be a nice little extra, and you can add that to the sort of savings you can expect from your solar and battery. So you can either use the Synergy Battery Rewards VPP plan or an alternative commercial one. And at the moment, there's a list of that on their website as well, and there's only one other one that's available at the moment. If you're in a Horizon Power area, they've got another virtual power plant called Community Wave. And from their reading their website, it looks like you're signed up automatically to that whenever you install solar or a battery. And the amount you get paid depends very much on where you are in the state and what town you're in. So I would encourage you to go to their website and read a bit more about that. Look, virtual power plants are pretty new here, and they're a bit contentious at the workshops that I've done so far. People are really just learning about them. But what I always say is if you're looking at a virtual power plant, just make sure you have a really good read of the details and you understand how it works and how long you're locked in for. So the battery rewards one is a 2-year contract. So if it's not working for you, you can get out of it after that. So you've just seen how you can work out if a battery would work for you financially. Aside from the financial benefits and allowing renewables into the grid, they're also really great for blackout protection. If you do want blackout protection, you need to make sure you're very clear with your installer that that's what you want, because weirdly, not all batteries have it. I just kind of thought like that's what a battery's for, but it's not the case. You also need to be aware that backing up your entire house in a blackout is expensive. So most batteries are only going to be able to back up a few circuits, like your lights and your power points and maybe an aircon. So you need to discuss that with your installer about what you want and just make sure that they can deliver that for you with the battery they're proposing to install. If you want to prepare for multi-day blackouts, and that's certainly been an issue over East, you also want your batteries to be able to charge from your solar if the grid is down. And that, yeah, otherwise the battery might kick in a blackout, but then once it's run out, it's flat until the grid comes back. So these are all just things that you need to talk to your installer about, and they usually do cost more, so you just need to weigh up the costs and benefits for those things. If you're just getting solar installed at the moment, you don't need to worry too much about getting a battery compatible system, because like I showed you before, you should just be able to AC a battery to most existing systems. If you ask for a battery compatible inverter, they might try and sell you a hybrid inverter on its own, but without a battery, which works totally fine. But what I have heard is that you're then kind of limited to the types of batteries that you can use. And if you're coming back in, say, 5 years down the track, it might not even be compatible with whatever they've got available at the time. So, and they're just usually a bit more expensive up front as well. So that's just something else to be aware of and to talk to your installer about. Like I said at the start, you can also just replace your existing inverter with a hybrid inverter at the time when you get a battery. And so I have started to see some installers just quoting like a good quality but just really basic standard inverter. So you've got the option down the track to just take that one off and replace it, and you haven't lost as much money, or you can do the AC coupling thing too. Look, DC coupling or a hybrid inverter can actually be a better option if you're getting the battery installed straight away, just because it's all kind of neater, it all plugs in together, it's easier to install, and all your monitoring is in one app, and it's kind of easier to keep track of your energy use and stuff like that. So that's a benefit of that approach. So look, with batteries, there's obviously going to be lots of options your installer is going to be throwing at you. There are genuinely new technologies coming out all the time with inverters that let you do all sorts of fancy things like incorporating DC car chargers and stuff like that. There are genuine constraints that your house might have about what types of batteries and systems can be installed. And so this is where a lot of people do get analysis paralysis. And when I get analysis paralysis in this situation, my approach is always just to step back and just be really clear with my installer about what I want the battery to do, get them to come up with the best options, whether they be AC or DC coupled and what brands and all that sort of stuff. And then you can take the costs that they quote, you can put them back in the calculator, see if it is still worth it for you at the end of the day and whether it's worth paying extra for those extra options and stuff. So I'm always quite worried about my workshop participants at this point because I think they go, oh, okay, that sounds like it makes sense. And then they go away and they still get bamboozled by installers. So I've included that link to that guide there on the slide. So that's a really good one. It goes into lots of bit more detail, really easy to read. And yeah, if your installer is sort of quoting the latest and greatest brand and says all sorts of things, you can always search for it on the Solar Quotes blog and they'll give you an honest opinion about whether it's really as good as they say it is. All right, finding a good installer. Unfortunately, there's never any guarantees with this. You can always get a dodgy salesperson, but these are the things that I do to increase the likelihood of getting a good installer. And the number one thing is that they use a Solar Accreditation Australia accredited designer and installer. And this is an accreditation that is given to the individual person that designs your system and also the individual that comes to your house and oversees the installation. And that is basically the basic kind of accreditation that you want them to have. They need that to be able to claim the STCs. And to make it more confusing, it used to be called the CEC Accredited Designer and Installer or Clean Energy Council. And lots of their websites still have that old terminology on it just to make everything more confusing. But yes, that absolute minimum qualification you want them to have. The other thing I do is we can now look at the WA battery rebate vendors because the government has done some due diligence on those vendors that are there and they need to be signed up to a code of conduct and there's various other things that they check when they have put them on that list. So that's good. You can go there and that can be another good starting place. Solar Quotes has a database of reviews and I will always search for my solar installers on there. They accept reviews for all solar companies, not just their vetted companies. But that's a really useful resource. And of course, you can also ask for a quote via their quote generator as well. And then finally, Switch Your Thinking has a great program unfortunately, for their Switch Your Thinking member councils, but it's called Rewards for Residents, where they've got 3 or 4 installers on there now that they've also done some due diligence into. And yeah, so that if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, that can be a good place to sort of start. Of course, all of the usual consumer protection applies when it comes to solar installers. Stay away from anything unsolicited like door-to-door salesmen or letters and things like that. My own father-in-law got approached by a door-to-door solar salesman the other day, and I was really horrified by some of the sales tricks they tried on him. So yeah, stay away from anything like that. And of course, get multiple quotes, check their ABN and electrical license, check they've been around a long time, talk to your friends, all those things that you would normally do. I put the most effort into researching the installer because ideally, if you get a good installer, the rest of the process should be pretty easy, hopefully. All right, and the other thing you can do to check you've got a good installer is check they give you a good quote. And so these are all of the things that I like to see in a good quote, or what I think is a good quote, and I'm going to go through each of them now. So the first thing they should do is give you the size of your system and a picture showing you where it should fit on your roof. And the standard size for solar panels in WA, as you probably guessed, is 6.6 kilowatts on a 5 kilowatt inverter. And you're allowed to do that because the solar panels never produce their maximum. That's why you can have more solar panels than the inverter. This is essentially kind of the limit for single phase in WA. If you've got three phase, you can get more than that. And if you get a battery, depending on the brand and your setup at the house and all that sort of thing, they might also be able to put a larger solar system on the battery too. Popular opinion kind of is at the moment is just to kind of go with the 6.6 kilowatts, because even if your usage is a little bit low now, you might want to allow for future use, like you might get an electric car or two, or install another aircon, or you might shift to electric hot water heating. So you just want to allow a little bit to allow for that increase in consumption that you might have in the future. Being the standard sort of package offered, it's often the cheapest per kilowatt as well. But yeah, look, play around with the calculator. If you think a smaller system is going to be better for you, then ask them to quote on that. Or if you've got three phase or you want to get a battery, you can also use the calculator to model the returns on what a bigger system would do for you. For a battery, they will usually quote how much it will store in kilowatt hours and how much it can supply in any one time in kilowatts. And the typical battery size for a house, as you've also probably guessed, is around about 10 kilowatt hours, up to about 16. And that's why all the rebate sort of programs reference that size. And I guess you can kind of see as a bit of a rule of thumb, like if most houses use 20 to 30 kilowatt hours per day, 10 kilowatt hours is basically going to cover the evening peak period, even if it doesn't last you all night. Again, use the calculator to work out what size battery might be best for you though. If you've got a really complicated roof, this is the point at which you look at the picture and make sure they've taken a little bit of time and put a little bit of effort into designing your system. Make sure it's not sort of like visibly sticking out over a ridge line or anything, or covering up your hot water system. And also make sure, especially if you've got a complicated roof, but everyone should get a site visit, but it's particularly important for someone with a complicated roof. Make sure they come and measure it before you accept the quote, because you don't want them to come out on the day and then they're going, oh, actually, it's not going to fit. And then you're making decisions on the fly, which is a terrible way to be making decisions. Also have a look at the roof faces that they've put on. It used to be that you tried to get your panels, as many panels as possible, on the north facing roof, because that gave you the highest overall production. But most of that production is in the middle of the day, and most people actually use most of their power first thing in the morning, and also when they get home in the evening. So it can also be good to have some on your east and west faces as well, because it produces more power at those times. Also with the feed-in tariff during the day, it's very low, but after 3 p.m. it's 10 cents. So while it's a small part of your savings, that can be a nice little bonus if you've got some west-facing panels. Panels are so cheap now, it can actually even be worth putting them on your south-facing roof, which generates the least. Like mine are on the south face of my roof, but I've got them on like panels to make them face a little bit more north. Yeah, just make sure your quotes sort of factored in that reduction in production, because it'll be about 20-30% less. And then if you want to verify that, you can go back to that solar calculator, because you remember where there was an option where you could choose where your solar panels were facing, and so you can just pick south there. So a shade assessment. So if you've got a lot of trees or aerials or things like that that are going to shade your panels, I think your quote should include a shade assessment, and your anticipated production should be adjusted based on that. They used to just, so installers used to just look at your roof and go, oh, nah, I don't reckon it's worth it for you. Or if they were really good, they had like a special camera which could estimate it. But now what you'll start to see is that a lot of the quotes look the same, and that's because they use these quote tools. There's only like 3 or 4 of them, and though most of those quote tools, I think, actually have this option to do a shade assessment in them. So I did this one in an open source quote tool, so I feel like if I can do it, there should be no excuse for them. And yeah, just basically they can pop in where the trees are, they'd make a model, it shows the angle of the sun and how it affects your production at different times of the year. So it's pretty clever. If you do have shade issues, you can get microinverters, which are like little mini inverters on each panel. They help minimize the impact of the shade. They can be good for complicated roofs as well, but they do cost more, so you have to weigh that up. So all quotes, I think, should have information on the performance of your system. So the electricity generation, the greenhouse gas savings, your self-consumption percentage, and financial returns. And they should ask you for your power bills so that that part is relatively accurate. And then you can compare that to what you're getting in the calculator as well. I think all quotes should include web-based monitoring for consumption and production. So most inverters will have some sort of online portal that only monitors production, and that's really handy. That's like the green curve you can see in this picture there, like you can see how it's generating during the day. That portal can usually be set up with alerts that will email you when the system is down, which is really important to make sure you're not going to get a rude shock with your power bill at some point down the track. But on top of that production monitoring, it's also really helpful to have a consumption monitor. So what your house is actually consuming. And that's really helpful for maximizing your self consumption. So this example here on the slide is my sister's. She was a really good sister. She listened to me. She got consumption and production monitoring. And you can see here in the morning from midnight, that's bumping along. That's just their fridge cycling on and off. And then they get up in the morning and that's probably their toaster and the kettle and stuff like that. And then the evening over here, we've got like the oven was probably on for a bit and then they're watching TV and then you can see when they go to bed. And in the middle of the day, the consumption pops up and then stays there throughout the whole day, nicely matching the solar curve, and then comes again when the solar comes down again when the solar production drops off. And that's their pool pump on a timer. And you can see there how much extra, like how much that increases their self-consumption and will be improving the business case for their solar panels. So I think that's really handy. It will cost a bit more. Last time I asked, probably it was $500 or so. If you get a battery, I think most batteries have this anyway because they kind of have to make it work with the battery, but just check with your installer about what exact monitoring your system would provide. All right, it should include all of the wiring, metering, or switchboard upgrades that are required and the relevant costs for all of those. Probably people in the Western Power region will need a new meter. Horizon, I think you already have one, so you might not. So that's good. And then when you get that new meter, you'll be able to access fabulous data like this, which also shows you where you're using your power throughout the day. So it's kind of similar to that consumption and production monitoring I showed you before, but this is net metering. So it's just showing what's coming in from the grid and what's going out to the grid. I kind of like the consumption and production monitoring better because of the way it's overlaid on each other and it's easier to see in an app, whereas you have to log into my account to see this. But yeah, look, if you don't want to pay for that, you can use this too. So if you're in a Western Power region, they have also been proactively rolling out these smart meters across Perth. So if you've been lucky enough to get one, you might already have data like this, but without the solar stuff. That's really handy to have a look at because it helps you take a guess at your current self-consumption, and therefore you can plug that back into the solar quotes calculator and that might change your savings. If you have this data because you already have solar and you're looking at a battery, you can download it in a great big spreadsheet, and there's a calculator on solar quotes that you can upload it into, and that helps you calculate quite an accurate battery size and helps you work out if you've got enough excess solar generated to charge a battery as well. So that's quite handy to do. I did it just the other day and Synergy's format is a bit funny for some reason, but I emailed it off to Solar Quotes and they changed it for me and put it into the calculator. So that was pretty cool. You can also request a smart meter, but you have to pay like $100 to get it if you request it in advance of the rollout. So Horizon Power properties, though, apparently all of properties in the whole network already have one of these. So that's really cool. And you should already be able to access data like this in your My Account feature. From what I was seeing on the website, you should be able to get your interval data. I unfortunately can't show you an example because I don't have an account with them, but go on to their My Account and have a play around and see if you can find it. Okay, I think all quotes should have the name and Solar Accreditation Australia number of the designer and installers of the system, and almost none of them do. But you can definitely ask for this, and you can even go on the SAA Australia website and check the number that they get it to make sure they're definitely accredited as well. It should list all the system components and include the following warranties for all the different components, the panels, the inverters and the batteries. The oh, sorry, the panel product, sorry, is a little bit short there. Probably should be more like 20 years now. And the installation workmanship warranty is also very important because that actually covers the install itself and all the wiring and bits and pieces in between. So that's another quite important one to have. And I would say at least 10 years for that one. The panel performance warranty is what you hear often about, like they're sort of 25, 30 years, but that's actually quite difficult to prove because the production from a solar panel varies so much from year to year based on the weather conditions. So it's quite difficult to make a claim on that warranty, so don't worry about that so much. But the product warranties are obviously really important because if the product's defective and it fails, that's what you claim it under. All right, it should include an itemized price, including the STCs and how much they are going, the price of the STCs that they've claimed there. Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. It should include the brands and the models of all components. And this is the part where I think most people get a lot of analysis paralysis and where installers almost like to confuse people the most. And I find the easiest thing to be reasonably assured you're getting a reputable brand is to refer to these two charts on the Solar Quotes website. So they have worked with all their installers to work out which are the most sort of reputable and well-supported brands in Australia. And so they've got a chart for solar panels and they've got a chart for inverters as well. And they've got another one for batteries too, which I've given you a link to. When it comes to the solar panels, like they're all pretty much the same. Like some of them are a little more efficient than others, but you're not really, once you install them, you're not really going to notice the difference between any of those brands on your bill. So yeah, basically on any of those ones are pretty reputable. When it comes to the inverters, they are the part of the system that is most likely to fail. So I would usually say, oh, maybe go with one of the better quality ones, unless you're doing the thing where you're just doing a basic one and you might switch it out later on. Then, like, yeah, some of the cheaper ones on this list are also fine. And obviously with batteries, they can have issues, so it's probably better to go with a higher quality battery as well. So after installation, there's not too much to do. You just want to make sure that they set up your monitoring and apps and alerts and all that sort of stuff before they leave, or especially before you pay them, because they're less likely to want to do that after you've paid them. And they'll usually have some documentation and stuff that they hand over as well. So once you have your solar panels installed, you want to make sure that you're making the most of them. And like I've said, the amount you self-consume makes a huge difference to your savings. And that's why that monitoring is so useful to work out how you're going with self-consuming your solar power. And yeah, so you hear a lot about people saying, put your dishwasher on in the middle of the day, put your washing machine on. So yes, absolutely do all that. That's important. But having said that, that can really depend on your behavior. And yeah, we start out with good intentions and then things, you stop doing it after a while. So what's probably going to have a bigger impact on your self-consumption is the set and forget options. And the really big one is your hot water system, because hot water usually makes up about a quarter of your energy use. So if you've got a heat pump or an electric hot water system or solar with an electric booster, you can put it on a timer to come on every day during from about 10 till 3. If you've got a gas system, you can't use it to do that. So you're paying for gas over here while you've got solar that's been sitting there ready to be used for free. So if you've got a gas system now, before it fails, start thinking about what you might want to replace it with. And the most efficient electric option is a heat pump. And we get you to think about it early because when your hot water system fails, all you usually want is a hot shower again. So people make very rushed decisions at that point, and they just kind of go with whatever the plumber's telling them to do. So, and it's something that will impact your bills for a really long time. So it's good to get ready now. So other great set and forget things are things like running your pool pump in the middle of the day. An electric car or two is a really great way of soaking up all that extra solar production so you can drive around for free. And we also find that installing solar is often a great gateway to getting off gas and becoming all electric. And Rewiring Australia, a really great organisation, they've done some amazing work working out how much that actually saves homeowners. And yeah, it's a huge amount of carbon and cost savings. And then finally, maintenance. You don't really need to clean your panels unless you're living in a really dusty place or you've got birds roosting on them or anything like that. If your roof is flat, it's good to have them tilted a bit so the rain can clean them. Make sure, just check your monitoring from time to time, make sure everything's still working. The most important thing is an electrical inspection and service every 3 to 5 years. And you can either just get the original installer back, or if you weren't so fussed, like weren't so happy with what they did, you could get another independent sort of inspector to come back and have a look at them. And that just means like if the panels are damaged, if you do a regular inspection, you'll pick that up sooner. It means you'll be able to have, they're more likely to have compatible parts because, you know, the standards of technologies are advancing so quickly, and you're more likely to be able to claim on your insurance